Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a very exciting video. It is an unhaul, but I'm unhauling books because we finally bought a house after 2 years of house hunting. And so naturally we've got to move everything, which means me moving like 400 books. And I don't think the enormity of the task has quite hit me until I've now just said it aloud. So I've been trying to decide on what books to unhaul. So I have a stack here, but I'm probably going to add a part 2 onto this video, which is kind of almost vlog style with me at home with my bookshelves there, getting rid of more things. So consider this part 1 of the segment, but let's get into what books I want to get rid of. Firstly, I still don't know why I've got these hanging around because I've mentioned book 2 in an unhaul previously, but I must have had 2 copies and I haven't quite got around to getting rid of all of them, and that is The Great Hunt and The Eye of the World, which are the first 2 Wheel of Time books, and I tried reading them. I liked the first one, I hated the second one. It's a fantasy series that is most beloved by a lot of people, but it just was not for me at all. So I am not keeping them around because they're very thick and they take up a lot of shelf space and they will be heavy to carry to a new home. And then similarly, another fantasy series is The Witcher, and this is book 2. I think, yes, book 2, and then the first 2 sets of novellas. While I enjoyed the novella books enough, they weren't really worth new favourite kind of accolades. And then I continued on to the series and it had rape and violence against women, and I'm like, well, that's a pretty bad shorthand to develop your characters, using that as character development to make them grow, I guess. And I didn't like that theme around the world. They don't have to suffer that deeply and that clearly on page for me to understand a message. So I was like, I'm not going to see more of this happen for the rest of the series because I'm going to stop reading it, and that's why I'm getting rid of these. Then I have 2 books that I ended up winning along with Scifi by Brandon Sanderson. That one I've read. These 2 I've not touched. The first one is Blind Space, and of course the sun just went behind a cloud. Blind Space is a sequel and I have not read the first book. I also don't own the first book, and this has just sat on my shelf and I've completely forgot about it for 8 months. So I don't think I'm interested in reading it, or I would not have completely forgotten it from my general TBR. So I need to get rid of it, and again, it's really big, so there's no point lugging this to a new house and then realizing that I don't want to read it because I don't have the first book. I may as well just get rid of it now and save myself the struggle. And then the other one that I won was Winter's Orbit, and I've been back and forth in my own head for a couple of months now about whether I actually want to read this. And I was like, you know what? I actually don't think I do want to read this. If I do, I'll try the audiobook. I'll go to my library or something. But this is a book that seems to be marketed for the male-male romance, but in actual fact it's more about politics, and I'm someone who reads for characters and for a romantic subplot. Whether the romance subplot exists or not, I'm not super fussed, but if it is there, I want it to be at least prevalent for the first 2/3. And I read my friend Marie's review, and I think because our reading taste is so similar, I probably will just give this a 3 or 3.5 stars, and I want to be reading books that I give 4 or 5 stars. So that's why I'm getting rid of this one. It's not that I think I'm gonna hate it, it's not that I've DNF'd it, it's not that I've even started it. I just don't think that I'll like it, so I'm getting rid of it. And then similarly with this one as well, I have been going back and forth with it about, do I unhaul it, don't I unhaul it, but I've settled on do unhaul it, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be in this video. And it is The Inheritance, or the 100,000 Kingdoms, which is a title that I've got wrong numerous times on this channel, but it's by N.K. Jemisin, who wrote the Broken Earth trilogy, and I loved that trilogy, but I could not get into this. I ended up DNFing it in January on audiobook, and I said to myself that I would go and I would try the physical copy because obviously that's the copy that I own, but if I couldn't get into the audiobook and the style of it, then I'm probably not going to gel with the writing style in a physical book as well. And so I was like, you know what, instead of me being concerned about whether I'm actually going to like this, I'm just going to ditch that emotional baggage. I'm going to leave the fact that I DNF'd it in 2022 and then just go into 2023 and not bring it with me. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna donate it to somebody and they're gonna like it because I'm not gonna take it with me. We're moving at the end of September, so I'm getting in as early as I can with this video, and hopefully I can add bits on afterwards of more things that I find to get rid of. And then sci-fi is having a bit of a bad rap at the moment, at least in this video. I promise that I love sci-fi fantasy. I'm not a liar. I'm getting rid of the Expanse books. I've got books 3 and then book 2 with me, but book 1 must be at home, which is Leviathan Wakes, so I'll probably hold it up later. But these are books in a series that is very detailed, and each book introduces a whole host of new side characters because your core characters have to interact with new people, right? And because of that, I'm not connecting to the third book in the series. I ended up putting this down at about 215 pages in, and I talked about this in my July wrap up. And so I'm like, if I'm not really connecting with this series anymore, then it's not really worth me holding on to them. So that is why I'm getting rid of these as well. I really wanted to like this series, but I think I've just got to watch the TV show and give up for now on reading the books. Then we've got a graphic novel that I liked but didn't necessarily love, and that is Bloom, and this is marketed to people who love Heartstopper, hence me reading it. But when I read this, I was like, this doesn't really focus too much on the romance. It focuses more on family and responsibility and identity, and while those things are interesting, I think I would have taken something different from it if I hadn't gone in under the lens of thinking it's like the next Heartstopper. It's drawn in a very similar style to what Heartstopper is, and so that's what drew me to it as well. But it's more about these two boys who work together in a bakery, and the bakery is owned by the main character's family, and there's financial debt and everything involved in that, as well as him trying to figure out who he wants to be, what his career wants to be in the future, because he's only a teenager. So I like the aspects that felt similar to Heartstopper, not because they were like a mirror image of Heartstopper, just because naturally I'm drawn to those themes and those kinds of characters. But with the story, it felt a bit shoehorned at the end. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine, but I'm not going to hold on to it because I'm never going to reread it. And I honestly think that someone could get a lot more enjoyment out of it than I could, because it's just going to collect dust when I move, and I'm not keen on bringing it with me because, again, it's probably heavier than the Wheel of Time. Like, it seems not too thick, but it feels quite hefty. Now for this part of the video, I have 2 more books, and one is a sci-fi, unfortunately, and the other's a young adult fantasy. So the sci-fi is Dune. I gave this 3.75 stars, I think. The ending, or at least the second half, felt very white savior to me. And while I enjoyed the different aspects of the politics and kind of the magical sci-fi abilities and the world building in here, the ending just felt white savior. So that is probably because of its time, because it was written as one of like the first sci-fis ever. I don't know, 1940s, 1950s. I'm probably lying about the time, I've forgotten, so I'm guessing. But I know it's also a 6-book series, and I can't really see myself continuing soon, and by soon I mean in the next couple of years or ever. So I'm not going to hold on to it because it just is not a book that is nostalgic for me in any sense, because I only picked it up recently. So there's no point in me getting invested and trying to continue, because it would just be a slog for me, and I'm not going to do that to myself and put myself in a reading slump, so it's got to go. And then on the flip side of that, I have a book here that I quite enjoyed actually, and I gave it 4 stars, but I don't feel any necessary need to hold on to it. And when I was looking through all of my bookshelves, they are behind the camera over there, when I was looking through them, I was like, I don't feel the need to take this with me, and so I'm kind of just shedding the extra books. And so Cemetery Boys is also being unhauled, but some of these I might end up selling off on a Facebook page that's local to me, so this might just go on that Facebook page, and then that way someone else in the right age group or the right fan base can actually pick this up and enjoy it as well. So it's not just going to get tossed, it's not just going to get randomly donated. I think this is going to go to someone who will really enjoy it as well, but I'm somebody who doesn't need to keep this. I'm not hugely attached to books. I'm really finding it a lot easier to DNF books and to unhaul books, so to let this go is not too much of a struggle for me. I'm pretty cutthroat actually. I've gotten quite good at getting rid of things, so while I did enjoy this and I benefited from the reading experience, I think it's time for this book to move past me as its owner. But that is it for the beginning part of this video. I'm going to jump into future Beck now, and she's going to tell you about more stuff that I want to get rid of. Okay, so here is part 2, the rest of my Unhaul. I have a massive box of stuff here. There's a lot in here, including some merch, which I will go through really quickly. Some of these books might be special editions or advanced reader copies as well, and by the time you see this, I will have either sold them or donated them to other bookish friends, so just assume that by the time you see this, none of this will be available, so I apologise. But let's get into the rest of the Unhaul. A while ago, a subscription box, I think it might have been a Luma crate or maybe Fae crate. Anyway, they did a Nevernight box or a Dark Dawn box or something, so I have a tiny little Mia in here, a little plushie, and then I've also got a drink bottle here that I've never used. I've only displayed this. I'm gonna get rid of both. And then lastly, I've got a pencil case thing of Never Flinch, Never Fear, Never Forget, which is the quote that is associated very much with Nevernight. I think Mia says it a lot, or it's said to Mia as the protagonist. It also breaks my heart, but I need to get rid of these comics. Otherwise, a part of me is gonna think, I think maybe I should try reading those again, and I know that I didn't gel with them. I have watched the first couple of episodes of the series on Amazon Prime and I'm enjoying it. So it's Paper Girls. I think this is volumes 1 and 3. Volume 2 is floating around somewhere. I have my books across 2 houses at the moment, but just assume they're all going. And then another comic is Old Man Logan, which is a Wolverine comic. I read this, I think I gave it an average rating like 3.5 stars. One of my favorite X-Men characters is Wolverine, but I find the art style of the older style comics, especially across Marvel and DC, I don't like the drawing style. So I did read this because of my love of Wolverine, but I didn't like the art style, so I feel no need to reread it or hold on to it. And now going into the actual books that I've got, one of them is the Spiderwick Chronicles by Holly Black. I remember winning this ages ago and I loved reading this as a kid, and I've held on to it because of the deckled edges, and this edition feels like it belongs in a fantasy book. Like it feels like it belongs over a hearth kind of thing with a whole bunch of old style books. But I'm never gonna read this again, at least. And I think I stopped reading the series at some point too, so it needs to go as well. I don't really read Holly Black either anymore. I read a whole lot of Cassandra Clare when I first got into reading YA in general. And Cassandra Clare and Holly Black, I know they're friends and they write very similar supernatural young adult stories. City of Bones is by Cassandra Clare, so that will probably ring a bell for most people. I'm not gonna keep this because I don't see any point to. This is the second book. I don't know where the first book is. Assume it goes as well, kind of like Paper Girls. It's a zombie book in the end, and I read this a while ago because it involved 2 protagonists that are fairly unlikely when you consider post-apocalyptic books. It was in a similar vein to The Quiet Place, or In a Quiet Place, with Emily Blunt in it, that film with the aliens that could detect sound. In a similar way, this has creatures that can sense you, and the main character has, I think, a younger sister or finds a young girl, and they use sign language to communicate, and then they find a civilization of people. So I liked this when I read it, and as a concept I really enjoyed it too, but it didn't feel like it was supposed to wrap up in just a duology, and I can't find a book 3. So I don't think I'm gonna ever revisit this at all. And I did enjoy it at the time, but since then my enjoyment has kind of petered out, so I don't feel the need to hold on to this one anymore either. And then I am doing a mass exodus of Amy Kaufman, so I've got Undying and Unearthed, the sci-fi duology that she wrote, and then I've also got her Ice Wolves series as well. I've actually got a separate spoiler-free review for this trilogy. I enjoyed it, but I don't, again, feel the need to hold on to these. They're just kind of taking up space, and as authors, Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, both individually and as a duo, I feel like I've outgrown a little bit. They are very, very hyped, especially when you first enter reading young adult, but I feel like I've done my dash with their work, and so I'm getting rid of these. Some of them are personalised as well because I'm lucky enough that they are Australian and I'm Australian, and so I've been to a whole bunch of their book launches, which have been incredible, but I don't want to hold on to these anymore. Then we've got another young adult book, an Australian young adult called Shadow's Breath, and I enjoyed this one too. It was interesting with a twist. I became quite emotional from it, so it was a great book, but I don't, again, feel the need to keep this, especially because I don't read that much young adult anymore. And then I'm exposing myself for a massive Doctor Who fan who hasn't really kept up with Doctor Who, because I've got a 12 12 Doctor Who Stories of Christmas, and I didn't love this. It's been sitting on my shelf collecting dust. It's time to get rid of it finally. And then I read The Knife of Never Letting Go a long time ago. I finished the trilogy, unhauled them because I love the first book, didn't like where the story ended up. And so I'm like, well, maybe I should just unhaul this one as well because it follows characters that aren't the superheroes, and I'm a fantasy reader, and while this had some kind of supernatural element to it, I don't really remember too much about it. It wasn't completely gripping, and so I don't feel the need to hold on to it. I know I bought it because it's a hardcover and it has stained edges, but that's not a reason to keep a book. So The Rest of Us Just Live Here is hitting the road. And then similarly to the first part of this haul, I'm getting rid of another N.K. Jemisin book, which hurts me because I really want to love her as an author, but I feel like she is very distinct about what she writes about and goes very hard about what she writes about, and that can either be completely to your palate or completely not. And this one felt adjacent to what I'm used to from her, and so because of the style and the fact that it's urban fantasy rather than complete straight up fantasy, it just wasn't gelling for me. I think I gave it a 4 stars, but then I reduced it upon reflection to about a 3 because my enjoyment was not really there. While it touched on brilliant themes, it needs to be more than just the themes to me, and that is The City We Became. I remembered that I owned this because the sequel is coming out at the end of this year, and I thought, I have no interest in reading it, why do I have the first book? So I won't have the first book any longer. And now we've reached the part of the video that may cause some outrage, so let me just get into it. Firstly, I have the Australian ARC edition of Nevernight and the US ARC edition of God's Grave. I remember going on a massive kick for this series to the point of complete and utter obsession, where I got every special edition, every paperback edition, every ARC copy that I could possibly get my hands on through various trades and connections in the publishing industry. A few of them Jay Kristoff actually gave to me himself when I went to book signings, but I have kept those specific ones because obviously the memory, and they're a little bit more special than just a random trade I did online. But these two I am letting go. It's hard for me to part with these because you obviously can't buy these. These are ARC editions, so proofs of books before they're published, but I need the space. They need to go. And I think someone like me, when I was basically obsessed with this series, I think someone else is going to really, really love getting these. So I'm going to reluctantly but necessarily let them go. And then the last 3 books in this unhaul are also by Jay Kristoff, and they are special editions of Nevernight and God's Grave. They have stained edges, or not all of them, but pretty much for the most part they are special editions and also first editions. So these are the ones that I'm planning to sell because I know that people are eager to own these ones. So these, the ARCs and all of that, is the rest of my unhaul. I have no idea how many books I unhauled. Maybe I'll count them and then I'll put them on the screen so you can actually find out too. But that is it for this video. Let me know if you've unhauled anything or if you find it difficult to unhaul books in the comments below. I would love to know. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll put another video on the screen that I think you should check out, and I'll talk to you in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.